There is a 1998 episode of South Park where two 10-year-old boys defend big corporations in front of their entire town. 20 years later, the same show depicts the founder of the largest company in the world as a giant-headed alien creature who surveils families through their kitchen speakers, strips workers of their ability to shop online as punishment for organizing, has a labor leader killed by tricking children into tearing him apart, and takes over a mayor's office. Same show, same creators, 20 years apart. That distance and everything that explains it is what this video is about. South Park has been going after billionaires for nearly 3 decades, and the way it goes after them, who it targets, how hard it hits, and what it chooses to forgive tells you more about power in America than most serious journalism managed to say in the same period. Welcome to East Park. If long-form analysis like this is what you come here for, subscribing is free and it keeps this channel alive. Let us get into it. The ideological reversal. From quote zero to Bezos is an alien monster. There is a scene in a 1998 episode of South Park where two 10-year-old boys stand in front of their town and deliver a speech defending big corporations. Not mocking them, not questioning them, defending them. Stan and Kyle look the camera in the eye and say, essentially, that large companies are good, that they got big because they earned it, and that the people complaining about them are hypocrites who don't know what they're talking about. The crowd cheers. The episode ends, and Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the two men who made South Park, walk away having produced what one professor of literature would later call the most complete defense of capitalism ever made by a television show. That was 1998. 20 years later, the same two men made an episode where the founder and CEO of Amazon arrives in a Colorado town as a giant-headed alien creature, watches families through the speakers sitting on their kitchen counters, strips workers of their ability to buy things online as punishment for going on strike, has the town's labor leader killed by tricking a group of children into tearing him apart, takes over the mayor's office, and is only defeated when the entire town gets high on marijuana and faces in the wrong direction while confronting him. That was 2018. The distance between those two moments is the actual story of this essay. Not just the story of South Park going after Jeff Bezos, but the story of a show that spent 2 decades building one argument about money and power in America, and then, in December of 2018, blew that argument up completely. This was not a small moment. It was a reversal so dramatic that reviewers who had watched the show for years sat down to write about it and used words like stunned. One critic at the AV Club, a publication that reviews television for a living, said they were more surprised by this episode than almost anything the show had done in years. Not because Bezos got mocked, South Park mocks everyone, but because the show had publicly changed its mind about something it had spent 20 years defending. To understand why that matters, you have to go back to the beginning. In 1998, South Park was in its 2nd season and still figuring out what kind of show it wanted to be. The episode in question was called Gnomes, and on the surface, it was about tiny creatures who sneak into a boy's bedroom at 3:30 in the morning and steal his underwear. The deeper story was about a national coffee company, a barely disguised version of Starbucks, called Harbucks, moving into South Park and threatening to put the local coffee shop out of business. The local coffee shop owner, a man named Mr. Tweak, spends the episode presenting himself as a small, honest businessman being crushed by a heartless corporation. He recruits the boys to speak at a town meeting on his behalf. He gives them an emotional speech about the importance of local business. He sends them out to fight the Harbucks Corporation. Then the episode shows you what Mr. Tweak is actually like behind closed doors. He is manipulative. He is greedy. He feeds his own child an alarming amount of coffee. His product, the show reveals, is genuinely worse than Harbucks. When his wife finally tastes the Harbucks coffee at the end of the episode, she admits it doesn't have the bland, raw sewage taste that Tweak's coffee has. The crowd, having heard this, decides to support Harbucks. The local coffee shop loses, and the show presents this as the correct outcome. The message was not subtle. Small businesses are not automatically good. Big corporations are not automatically evil. The best product wins, and that's how it should be. Parker and Stone were not hiding this argument. They were making it as directly as a cartoon about underwear-stealing gnomes possibly could. 6 years later, in 2004, they did the same thing with Walmart. The episode was called Something Walmart This Way Comes, and it treated the arrival of a Walmart store in South Park as a horror movie. Dark clouds rolled in, ominous music played. The townspeople became addicted to the store's low prices and could not stay away no matter how hard they tried. But by the end of the episode, the show delivered its verdict. The people complaining about Walmart are the problem. Randy Marsh, Stan's father, gives a speech where he tells the crowd that Walmart is them. That if they actually wanted small local stores, they would choose to pay more at those stores. That corporate power exists because customers choose it. The conclusion was familiar. The system works because consumers make it work, and if you don't like the result, look in the mirror. This was the the South Park worldview on capitalism for 20 years. Consistent, deliberate, and defended with actual arguments rather than just vibes. Parker and Stone were libertarians, people who believe the government should stay out of economic decisions and let the market sort things out. Their shows reflected that. When people on South Park complained about corporations, they were usually the butt of the joke. When corporations were shown to be successful, the show presented that success as earned. And then came December of 2018. The Amazon episodes, Unfulfilled and Bike Parade, Season 22, Episodes 9 and 10, aired on December 5th and December 12th. The premise was that Amazon had chosen South Park as the location for a new fulfillment center. This was a direct reference to something that had actually just happened in the real world. Amazon had spent all of 2017 and 2018 running a massive public competition where 238 cities across North America competed to host Amazon's second headquarters. The competition was wild. Cities offered billions of dollars in tax breaks. One city offered to rename itself after Amazon. Another offered Amazon its own dedicated car on a public train. The whole thing had ended just 3 weeks before the South Park episodes aired, when Amazon announced it had chosen two winners, one in New York and one in Northern Virginia. South Park, watching all of this happen, decided to set their episodes in a town that had just won the Amazon sweepstakes and was now learning what that actually meant. What it meant, according to the episodes, was that workers would be driven to exhaustion fulfilling orders, that the arrival of the fulfillment center would hollow out whatever local retail had survived, that Amazon would use its power over Prime memberships, its ability to take away people's ability to shop, as a weapon against workers who tried to organize, and that Jeff Bezos himself would show up as a being from another world, physically alien, unconcerned with the humans around him except as instruments for moving packages. The central character of the labor plot is a man named Josh Carter, identified as a former fulfiller who has been compressed into a small Amazon shipping box due to a workplace injury. If the box is opened, he will die. He leads a worker strike while trapped in that box. This is South Park being crude and absurd in the way South Park always is. But underneath the absurdity is a very specific argument. Josh is the logical endpoint of what Amazon actually does to its workers. He has been literally turned into the product. His body has been reshaped by the demands of the job into something that serves the company's packaging needs better than it serves him. He is not a person anymore. He is a unit. The AV Club reviewer, who called themselves stunned by the episode, made a specific comparison that matters here. They pointed out that the Gnomes episode back in 1998 had argued that corporations are good because they provide what people want. And they pointed out that in 2018, it was easier to believe that. The horrors of what Amazon specifically was doing to its workers were not yet fully public. The data on warehouse injuries, the stories about impossible quotas, the algorithmic discipline systems that could fire someone without a human manager ever making the decision, all of that was starting to emerge in 2018, but had not yet fully broken through into mainstream conversation. Parker and Stone, watching it emerge, made the decision that their old argument no longer held. That decision shows up in one specific exchange in Unfulfilled that is easy to miss because it's delivered so quickly. Jeff Bezos, the alien, tells the mayor of South Park what Amazon's philosophy is. He says the customer is the only thing that matters. He says this not as a villain monologue, but as a simple statement of fact. The way someone might tell you the sky is blue. And the show lets it sit there. It doesn't add a joke after it. It doesn't have a character pushback. It just lets you hear the philosophy stated plainly by the alien creature who runs the company. The customer is all that matters. Not the workers, not the town, not the mayor he's threatening, the customer. This was the same argument the show had made in 1998 in Gnomes. The corporation gives people what they want. The consumer is king. But in 1998, that argument was presented as a defense of corporations. In 2018, the exact same argument is presented as the thing that makes Bezos monstrous. Nothing changed in the logic. Everything changed in what the show believed the logic meant. That shift, using the same argument as both a defense and an indictment 20 years apart, is the most honest thing South Park did in 2018. It wasn't pretending it had never defended capitalism. It was showing you the same sentence and asking you whether it still sounded good now that you could see what it actually produced in practice. The fact that a show with a 20-year track record of mocking anti-corporate sentiment made this move is significant not just for South Park fans, but for anyone trying to understand how mainstream American culture processed the rise of the tech giants. South Park does not follow trends. It usually resists them aggressively. When something becomes the conventional wisdom, Parker and Stone tend to go the other direction on instinct. For them to look at Amazon in 2018 and say openly that this one has gone too far, that takes something real. What made Bezos the target that finally broke through their defenses is a question worth sitting with, and the answer has everything to do with the very specific design they chose when they decided to put him on screen. They didn't make him a greedy businessman. They didn't make him an out-of-touch executive. They made him an alien. And the alien they chose, the specific creature from the specific 1966 Star Trek story, was not picked at random. That choice, and exactly what it means, is where we need to go next. Section 2. The Telosian. What the alien design actually means. Before Jeff Bezos says a single word in Unfulfilled, you already know everything South Park thinks about him. You know it from the shape of his head. He walks into the South Park mayor's office, and the first thing you see is a skull that has expanded far beyond what a human skull is supposed to do. It is enormous. It is covered in visible veins. It pulses slightly. The top of it splits into two lobes in a way that is clearly designed to resemble the back end of a human body rather than the front. He moves slowly, with the kind of careful deliberateness that suggests he is always calculating rather than feeling. He looks at the mayor the way someone looks at a piece of furniture they are deciding whether to move or throw away. Parker and Stone did not make this creature up. They took it from a real television episode, a specific one from 1965 that almost nobody ever saw when it originally aired. The story behind that episode is worth knowing because it makes the South Park joke significantly sharper. When Star Trek was first being developed for television, the network NBC commissioned a pilot episode to decide whether the show was worth making. That pilot was called The Cage, and it was filmed in 1965. NBC watched it, decided it was too slow and too complicated, and rejected it. The Cage never aired as its own episode. It was partially folded into a later two-part episode, but for most of television history, it existed as something almost no one had seen. A rejected first draft of one of the most famous science fiction shows ever made. The central villains of The Cage are a species called the Telosians. They live underground on a planet called Talos 4. Their heads are enormous, swollen, veined, split at the top into two lobes. Their bodies are frail. They speak to humans through telepathy rather than out loud. They are, on the surface, a highly intelligent civilization that has survived a catastrophic war. What they actually are is something more specific and more disturbing. The Telosians nearly destroyed their own planet through conflict, and in the aftermath, they retreated underground and began living entirely through illusions, imagined realities they could project into the minds of other beings. Over time, this made them completely dependent on having living creatures to use as hosts for their illusions. Without a captive mind to fill with fabricated experiences, they had nothing. So when the USS Enterprise arrives at Talos 4, responding to what appears to be a distress signal, the Telosians see an opportunity. The distress signal was not real. It was bait. The Telosians lured the Enterprise crew to their planet specifically to capture them and use their minds. The captain of the Enterprise in this pilot, a character named Christopher Pike, not James Kirk, is taken prisoner and kept in a cage. The Telosians fill his mind with elaborate illusions of freedom, of beauty, of companionship. While he experiences these fabricated realities, his actual body sits in a cell and is studied. The Telosians want to use him as breeding stock to repopulate Talos 4 with a servant species. The entire operation, the fake distress signal, the beautiful illusions, the careful maintenance of the captive, is a system designed to extract value from a human body while keeping the human mind too distracted to resist or even notice. This is the creature Parker and Stone chose to represent Jeff Bezos. The parallel is not decorative, it is the argument. The Telosians lure people in with something that seems like an opportunity and turns out to be a trap. Amazon ran a competition in 2018 where 238 cities competed to host a fulfillment center, offering billions of dollars in tax breaks, promising to rename streets and build dedicated train cars and do almost anything else Amazon asked. The signal Amazon sent out, "Come host us and get jobs and economic growth," was, in the view of South Park's episode, the same kind of lure the Telosians used. It looks like rescue. It was bait. The Telosians keep their captives physically confined, while filling their minds with experiences that feel like freedom. Amazon workers in real fulfillment centers were, by 2018, working in conditions where every movement was tracked, every bathroom break was timed, and every moment of slowing down was registered by an automated system that could generate disciplined paperwork without a human manager ever being involved. The body was being used with extreme efficiency. The mind was being offered the story that this was a good job, that $15 an hour was opportunity, that the company cared about safety. The Telosians communicate through telepathy rather than speech. In Unfulfilled, Bezos is shown communicating with the mayor at certain points without speaking out loud. And more importantly, he listens through technology rather than through presence. The Amazon Echo devices sitting in citizens' homes are his equivalent of the Telosians' monitoring equipment. He watches the McCormick family through their Alexa. He watches the mayor through her devices. He is everywhere in the town without ever physically being in any of those rooms. His intelligence gathering is total, his presence is invisible, and the people being watched have invited the listening device into their own homes. This is the level at which the joke operates. It is not a joke that says Jeff Bezos is weird looking. It is a joke with a specific science fiction reference at its center that maps point by point onto the actual practices of the company he ran. Lure the workers with the promise of a good job. Monitor them constantly. Use them up. Discard them when they can no longer maintain the pace. And do all of this while presenting yourself as someone who cares deeply about the customer, which is the Talosian equivalent of filling the captive's mind with beautiful illusions while the body sits in a cage. IGN's reviewer of the episode, Jesse Schedeen, described the Bezos design as a mashup of the Talosians and the aliens from a Twilight Zone episode called To Serve Man. That second reference adds another layer. To Serve Man is one of the most famous Twilight Zone stories ever made. The plot involves an alien species arriving on Earth with a book they say contains a guide to serving humanity. The book's title is To Serve Man. World leaders believe this means the aliens are here to help. They translate the book. Midway through translation, they realize the title is not a mission statement. It is a recipe description. The book is a cookbook. The aliens are not servants. The humans are the food. The combination of these two references, the Talosians, who use humans as captive resource, and the cookbook aliens, who consume humans while convincing them they are being helped, creates a very specific portrait of what Parker and Stone believed Amazon was doing. The workers are told they are being given opportunity. They are being used. The body goes into the fulfillment center. The company extracts what it needs. What comes out the other end is, in the episode's central image, a man compressed into a shipping box. That image, Josh Carter, the labor organizer who has been physically compacted by a workplace injury into the shape of an Amazon package, is the episode's most direct expression of the Talosian argument. Josh is what happens to a human body when the Talosian logic runs to its conclusion. He has been processed. He is no longer a person in any shape that the world around him recognizes as a person. He is a unit. He can still think, he can still lead, he can still demand dignity. But his physical form has been reorganized by the demands of the company into something that matches the company's needs better than it matches his own. He is literally in a box. Opening the box will kill him. The box is both his prison and his life support. If he stops being packaged, he dies. The Talosian design also explains a detail that might otherwise seem like just a throwaway gag. In the episode, Bezos mentions that he misses his home planet and looks forward to returning to a place called Bezos, which the show clearly treats as his planet of origin, where he can touch butts with his wife. This joke lands as crude nonsense if you are not thinking about the Talosian reference. If you are, it lands as something more pointed. The Talosians' life on Talos 4, their real life, the underground existence they actually inhabit, is presented in the original Star Trek episode as deeply sad. They have retreated from the physical world almost entirely. Their bodies are atrophied. Their needs are basic. What they actually want, underneath all the elaborate machinery of captivity and illusion, is simple companionship that they no longer know how to have in any real way. Bezos, in the South Park version, is the same. He has spent so much time as the creature running the machine that what he actually wants, to go home, to touch butts, to exist somewhere uncomplicated, is both pathetic and strangely sympathetic. Parker and Stone have always been interested in the gap between what power looks like from the outside and what it feels like from the inside. The Talosian design puts Bezos on the outside of humanity while implying, in that one small moment of longing for his home planet, that there might be something recognizably human buried underneath the machine. This does not make him sympathetic enough to let him off the hook. He still orders Kenny killed. He still strips workers of their prime memberships as punishment for organizing. He still takes over the mayor's office and runs the town as an extension of his fulfillment operation. But the home planet moment is there, and it is doing something. It is making the same argument that the Talosian story makes in the original Star Trek episode. These beings became monsters through a process. They were not born as predators. They built a system that required predation to function, and then they became the system. The question the design puts to you, without quite stating it, is whether the same thing is true of the man who built Amazon, whether the alien is what was always there, or whether the alien is what the machine made him. South Park does not answer that question directly. It rarely does. What it does instead is put the creature in front of you, give it the specific face of a being from a story about captivity and consumption, and let you sit with the image. The Talosian design was also, on a simpler level, a visible argument about physical transformation. Jeff Bezos in 2018 was in the middle of one of the most widely noticed personal physical transformations in the history of American business. He had become notably more muscular and imposing over the preceding years. years. The public conversation about his appearance was constant and slightly bewildered. People were not sure what to make of the fact that the richest man in the world had decided to rebuild his body with visible intensity. The South Park version of Bezos does the opposite. Instead of making him more impressive physically, the show gives him a body that is almost nothing, small, fragile, barely there, with a head that has expanded to absorb everything. The intelligence has consumed the humanity. The brain is all that is left. Everything else has been directed outward into the system. This is a deliberate inversion, and it is the cruelest visual joke in the episode. The real Bezos was working on making himself look more physically formidable. The cartoon Bezos is a creature who has directed all his resources away from the physical self and into the apparatus of power. His body is an afterthought. His head, the part that runs the machine, has grown enormous. When you add all of these layers together, the Telosian mythology, the cookbook alien reference, the Josh Carter image, the inverted physical portrait, the home planet moment, what you get is not a cheap celebrity impression. You get a sustained argument made through character design about what a human being looks like after spending enough time inside a certain kind of system. The alien is not Jeff Bezos. The alien is what Jeff Bezos and Amazon together produced. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That brings us to what was happening in the real world when these episodes aired, because the genius of the Bezos arc is not just how sharply it drew the creature, but how precisely it timed its arrival. The workers that Josh Carter represents were not fictional, and by December of 2018, what was happening to them had started to become very, very hard to ignore. Section 3, the real workers behind the episode. There is a man in Unfulfilled named Josh Carter. He used to work at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in South Park. He packed boxes, he fulfilled orders, he moved things from one place to another at the speed the company required. Then something happened to him at work, and the show does not specify exactly what because it does not need to. What it shows you is the result. Josh Carter is now living inside a small Amazon shipping box. His body has been compressed into the dimensions of a package. The box cannot be opened without killing him. He leads a worker strike from inside the box, carried by his coworkers, speaking through a small opening, organizing people from within the container that the job turned him into. This is a cartoon. The compression is not literal, but the workers it was built on were real, and what was happening to their bodies by December of 2018 was documented, specific, and significantly worse than most people watching the episode would have known. To understand how accurate South Park was being, you have to look at what was actually happening inside Amazon warehouses in 2018. Not years later, not in hindsight, but at the exact moment Parker and Stone were writing these episodes. Amazon had made the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health's Dirty Dozen list in 2018. This is a list that this organization publishes every year, naming the 12 most dangerous employers in America. Amazon made it in 2018. Then they made it again in 2019. The organization gave them a dishonorable mention in 2020. This is not a fringe group making extreme claims. This is a safety organization documenting what the government's own records showed about injury rates. The injury rates themselves were staggering. Analysis of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that Amazon warehouses had injury rates dramatically higher than comparable employers. Workers were getting hurt at rates that were, depending on the specific measure, double or more than double the industry average for warehouse work. The most common injuries were sprains, strains, and tears, the kind of damage that happens when a human body is required to perform the same motion at speed for hours at a time, day after day. These are not dramatic injuries. They are the slow building kind. Your shoulder starts hurting. You take some Advil. You keep working because stopping means missing quota, and missing quota means getting flagged. And getting flagged too many times means losing your job. So you keep moving. The shoulder gets worse. Eventually, you cannot ignore it anymore. You go to the clinic Amazon runs inside the warehouse. They give you an ice pack. They suggest you go back to work. A woman named Vanessa Malicio worked at an Amazon warehouse in Redlands, California for 8 months in 2018. She was required to pack as many as 68 individual items per hour, some weighing up to 50 pounds. She stepped onto a metal cart to lift a heavy box. The wheels rolled. She fell hard onto the concrete floor. For a few minutes, she mostly felt embarrassed. Then the pain in her arm became impossible to ignore. The warehouse clinic gave her Advil and a heat pack. She went back to work. A woman named Safio Muhammad had emigrated from Somalia and taken a job at an Amazon warehouse in Shakopee, Minnesota in 2018, her first job in America. She was working the holiday season, racing to move items off a conveyor belt before the next ones arrived. She was injured. She went to Amazon's in-house clinic. They gave her an ice pack. Ice packs. This is the medical response that appears again and again in the documented accounts from 2018. Not because the injuries were minor, but because the system was designed to keep workers on the floor, an ice pack, and back to work. The clock is still running. What made Amazon's injury rates particularly hard to talk about in 2018 was that the company had, that same year, done something that looked like a genuine act of generosity. In the fall of 2018, facing significant public and political pressure about its working conditions, Amazon announced that it was raising its minimum wage for all American workers to $15 per hour. This was a real raise for many workers. It was also, critics pointed out, a raise that came with the simultaneous removal of certain bonuses and stock options that some workers had been receiving, meaning that for some people, the raise was less meaningful than it appeared. But regardless of the specifics, the $15 announcement dominated the coverage. It was the story everyone told about Amazon in the fall of 2018. The working conditions story was there, documented in government records and worker testimony, but it was not the story that broke through. South Park aired Unfulfilled on December 5th, 2018, roughly 6 weeks after the wage announcement. The show chose to make the working conditions story the center of its episode at the exact moment the national conversation had been pulled toward the wage story. This is one of the things that makes the Bezos arc more journalistically sharp than it usually gets credit for. The central joke of the Josh Carter character, that a fulfillment center worker has been physically compressed into a shipping box by a workplace incident, is a distillation of something workers were describing in real terms. Not compression into a box, but a process of physical reduction that worked in the same direction. Workers described their bodies being reshaped by the job, the repetitive motions, the pace requirements, the way the job reorganized your physical existence around the needs of the conveyor belt. You came in as a person with a body that worked in a certain way. You left, over time, as something that the job had restructured for its own purposes. The injuries you accumulated were not random. They were the specific damage produced by specific tasks performed at specific speeds for specific numbers of hours. The monitoring system that South Park depicts through Bezos watching people through their Alexa devices maps directly onto Amazon's documented internal worker monitoring. Amazon tracked workers through scanners they carried on the warehouse floor. The scanners recorded how quickly each worker was completing tasks. The data from these scanners fed into a system that automatically flagged workers who were falling behind. If your numbers fell below the required level often enough, the system generated termination paperwork. In documented cases, this process happened without a human manager ever making a conscious decision to fire someone. The algorithm decided. The paperwork was generated, the worker was let go. Amazon called this system a way of maintaining productivity standards. Workers and their advocates called it something closer to what South Park was depicting, a form of surveillance and control so total that the human beings inside it existed primarily as data points being measured against the needs of the machine. The strike in Unfulfilled is led by Josh from inside his box. This is the episode's most direct engagement with what was actually beginning to happen in Amazon warehouses in 2018. Worker organizing at Amazon was not yet the major story it would become in subsequent years. The first successful Amazon union vote in American history would not happen until 2022, but the conditions that would eventually produce that organizing were already present and already being documented. Workers in Minnesota, in New Jersey, in New York, in California were beginning to push back through petitions, through walkouts, through public statements. The Shakopee, Minnesota warehouse, the one where Safio Muhammad was injured, became one of the earlier centers of worker organizing activity, with employees there raising safety concerns in increasingly organized ways. South Park knew about this not because Parker and Stone had done academic research into labor history, but because they were paying attention to what was in the news. The show has always operated this way, reading the same newspapers everyone else reads, watching the same cable news, scrolling through the same internet, and then deciding what to do with what it finds. In 2018, what it found when it looked at Amazon was not a company providing people with jobs and cheap goods. What it found was a company that had figured out how to extract maximum physical effort from human beings at the lowest possible ongoing cost, with a monitoring system so complete that the workers inside it had very little room to push back. The Josh Carter character is the show's compression of all of that into a single image. He is not just a funny visual gag. He is the answer to the question of what the Telosians' logic produces when you follow it all the way to the end. The Telosians use human bodies as resource. The machine extracts what it needs. What is left, when the extraction is complete, fits in a box. Josh is still alive. He still thinks. He still organizes. But his form has been determined by the company's needs rather than his own. He is the shape that Amazon made him. The character of Steven Stotch, Butters' father, who takes a job as a floor manager at the fulfillment center, is doing different work in the episode, but work that is equally grounded in documented reality. Steven is not a bad person. He is trying to provide for his family. He is torn between supporting the strike and keeping the lights on at home. The show depicts his daily life at the fulfillment center through a montage set to the song 16 Tons, a famous old American folk song about a coal miner who owes his soul to the company store, meaning he has worked so hard and been paid so little that the company controls his entire existence. Parker and Stone did not pick that song randomly. 16 Tons is one of the most well-known labor songs in American history. Setting Steven's warehouse montage to it places the Amazon fulfillment center directly inside a long history of American workers being used up by large employers in industries where the alternative to accepting bad conditions is having no income at all. What makes Steven's arc in the episode particularly honest is that the show does not let the audience be comfortable about their own role in his situation. The boys, Cartman, Kyle, Stan, Kenny, spend most of the episode focused on getting their bike parade accessories delivered. They are not thinking about the workers. They are thinking about their packages. When the strike stops deliveries, their first concern is how to get what they ordered. Stan eventually calls Bezos directly and arranges for the former mall workers to go into the fulfillment center as replacements for the strikers. Not because he cares about the workers, but because he wants his bike stuff. The audience, most of whom also use Amazon and also think primarily about whether their packages arrive, is being shown themselves in a 12-year-old boy negotiating with an alien creature to break a strike so he can win a bike parade. This is the episode's cruelest observation, and it is aimed directly at the viewer. The system that turns workers into boxes does not operate in a vacuum. It operates because the people on the other side of the transaction, the customers, want their orders fast and cheap and do not ask too many questions about what that requires. The Talosian logic is sustainable not just because Bezos enforces it, but because millions of people every day choose to participate in it. South Park is not letting you watch this episode from a safe distance. It is asking you where you were when Vanessa Malesio fell off the metal cart. It is asking what you were ordering. A later study, published by the University of Illinois Chicago's Center for Urban Economic Development in 2023, and drawing on surveys of nearly 1,500 Amazon workers across 451 facilities in 42 states, found that 41% of Amazon warehouse workers reported being injured on the job. Among workers who had been at the company for more than 3 years, more than half reported having been injured. 69% said they had taken unpaid time off in the previous month due to pain or exhaustion from the job. More than half reported feeling burned out. These numbers came 5 years after the South Park episodes aired. The conditions they document were present, in some form, in 2018. The show was not ahead of data that did not yet exist. It was paying attention to data that existed but was not getting the attention it deserved. When the AV Club reviewer compared the Bezos episodes to the show's earlier Man-Bear-Pig storyline, they were making a specific observation. Years earlier, South Park had mocked Al Gore for warning about climate change, treating his concern as self-important alarmism. Then, when the evidence for climate change became impossible to ignore, the show reversed course and acknowledged it had gotten that one wrong. The reviewer saw the Bezos episodes as the same kind of reversal applied to capitalism. The show looking at what was actually happening inside Amazon warehouses and deciding that its earlier defense of corporate power had not accounted for what that power actually looked like up close. Josh Carter, compressed into his box, leading his strike, is what Looking Up Close produced. __quote _3___. But the workers inside the warehouse were only part of what South Park was responding to in December of 2018. The other part was the spectacle that had played out on the outside, the competition that brought Amazon to South Park in the first place, and what it revealed about how much power one company had accumulated over the cities and governments that were supposed to be looking out for the people inside those warehouses. Section 4. The HQ2 competition. The bidding war the episode was built on. 3 weeks before Unfulfilled aired, Amazon announced the winners of the strangest competition in the history of American business. It had started in September 2017. Amazon put out a public announcement saying it was looking for a city to host a second headquarters, a campus that would eventually employ 50,000 people and represent a $5 billion investment. The company called it HQ2. They published a list of things they were looking for: a big city, strong transportation, access to educated workers, and a government willing to work with them. Then they told every city in North America to send in their best offer. The deadline was 6 weeks away. What happened next was something that urban planning experts, economists, and journalists would spend years trying to fully describe. 238 cities submitted proposals. 54 states, provinces, and territories across the United States, Canada, and Mexico entered the competition. Cities that had no realistic chance of winning spent enormous amounts of money and time and staff staff hours putting together detailed presentations for a company that had already, many analysts later argued, known roughly where it was going to end up. The offers those cities made were extraordinary, not just in dollar terms, though the dollar terms were remarkable enough on their own. Maryland offered $8.5 billion in incentives. New Jersey offered $7 billion. These are not small numbers. These are the kinds of numbers that could fund schools and fix roads and provide health services for years. Cities were offering this money to a company that was, at the time, worth over $1 trillion and was run by a man who was the richest person on the planet. But the money was only part of it. Cities also made offers that went beyond money into something harder to categorize. A city in Georgia offered to rename 345 acres of land the City of Amazon. Atlanta proposed building Amazon its own dedicated car on the public MARTA train system, a car that would move Amazon products around the city. The city of Tucson mailed Jeff Bezos a 21-foot cactus. Birmingham, Alabama placed giant Amazon dash buttons, the physical buttons the company used to sell for reordering household items, all around the city. The mayor of Kansas City went on camera and publicly reviewed Amazon products, giving them 5-star ratings as part of his city's pitch. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, jokingly offered to rename himself Amazon Cuomo if it would help his state win the bid. This is not satire. This is what actually happened. South Park's premise in Unfulfilled is that Amazon has chosen the town of South Park as the location for a new fulfillment center, and that the mayor struck a deal to make this happen because she wanted the jobs and the economic boost the company promised. The mayor spends the episode in a panic, terrified of Bezos, desperate to keep him happy, making promises she cannot keep about getting striking workers back inside the building. She has surrendered the town's independence to keep the company present, and now the company's alien CEO is using that dependency as leverage over everything she does. This is a compressed version of something that played out in real life across the entire country simultaneously. 238 mayors and governors and economic development officials had positioned themselves exactly where South Park's mayor ends up, owing something to Amazon, afraid of losing what Amazon might bring, willing to offer almost anything to stay in the running. The competition was structured so that this was the only rational response. Once your city entered the contest, withdrawing felt like losing. Staying in meant raising your offer. The whole thing was a machine for producing municipal desperation, and it worked perfectly. Brookings Institution researchers who studied the HQ2 bids noted that many of the cities had signed non-disclosure agreements with Amazon, meaning they were not allowed to tell their own residents what they had offered on their behalf. Cities like Dallas and Detroit avoided public disclosure laws entirely by routing their bids through chambers of commerce and private economic development groups rather than through official government channels. These groups had no legal obligation to show the public what they had promised. Some of those bids were still not public years after the competition ended. Some never became public at all. The competition ended on November 13th, 2018, 3 weeks before Unfulfilled aired. Amazon announced that it had chosen 2 winners, Long Island City in New York and Crystal City in Northern Virginia near Washington. New York State had offered approximately $1.7 billion in incentives. Virginia offered a substantial package of its own. The 2 winning cities would split the 50,000 jobs and the $5 billion investment between them. Then, a few months after the announcement, Amazon pulled out of New York entirely. Local politicians and community groups had pushed back hard against the deal. A coalition that included the state senator Michael Gianaris and the congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez organized opposition to the billions in public subsidies being handed to the richest company in the world. Amazon, facing this resistance, announced it was walking away from the New York location. It kept Virginia. What this meant in practice was that Amazon had run a competition that extracted billions of dollars worth of detailed economic data, infrastructure information, and workforce analysis from 238 cities, received $1.7 billion in New York incentives that it then walked away from without building anything, and ended up in the 2 major cities, New York and Northern Virginia, that most analysts had predicted it would choose before the competition even started. The American Prospect later described the entire HQ2 sweepstakes as a mass intelligence gathering operation, with cities handing Amazon proprietary information about their economies, their available land, their workforce capabilities, and their government's willingness to cooperate, all for free, packaged in detailed proposals submitted under competitive pressure. South Park aired its response 3 weeks after the winners were announced, and while the national conversation about what the competition had actually meant was just beginning, the episode's version of this story is, as South Park's versions always are, simplified and sharpened into something a cartoon can carry. The mayor made a deal, the deal brought Amazon to town, now the mayor is owned by the deal. Bezos sits at her desk in the finale and runs runs the town from her chair while she stands to the side and watches. This is not a complicated metaphor. It is the HQ2 story told in 40 seconds of screen time. What the episode adds to the story, what makes it more than just a news recap in cartoon form, is the question of what the town actually got in exchange for the deal it made. The jobs that Amazon brings to South Park in the episode are not new jobs. They are replacements for jobs that used to exist. The South Park Mall, which the boys visit in unfulfilled when the strike cuts off their Amazon deliveries, is already dead before the fulfillment center opens. The workers who used to staff it have become shambling, empty figures who can barely function. When the fulfillment center needs workers to replace the strikers in Bike Parade, these former mall employees are the ones who get brought in as replacements. The jobs Amazon promises to create are, in the show's telling, the same jobs that Amazon's existence already destroyed, just moved inside a warehouse with worse conditions and more monitoring. This observation was not fictional. Economists studying Amazon's actual effect on retail employment had documented by 2018 that the growth of Amazon corresponded with significant declines in traditional retail jobs across the country. The company was not adding net new employment to communities the way the HQ2 competition framing suggested. It was shifting employment from one kind of work to another, from retail jobs, which had their own problems but also had certain protections and norms built up over decades, to warehouse work structured around Amazon's specific productivity requirements. Whether that shift was a net gain for workers depended heavily on whose math you used and which workers you asked. South Park's mall zombie subplot answers that question in the show's own terms. The former mall workers do not look better off. They look like something has been taken from them. They shamble. They reach toward customers with helpless gestures, trying to help but lacking the inventory depth to do so. They are not villainous. They are not lazy. They are simply people whose function has been made redundant by a system larger than themselves, left to exist in a dead space between what they used to be and what the new economy has any use for. When these same workers get bussed into the fulfillment center as strike replacements in Bike Parade, the episode makes its sharpest point about the HQ2 competition. The town was told Amazon would bring jobs. Amazon brought the town's existing workers back to the same building in a worse version of the work they used to do, under conditions that are turning Josh Carter into a box. The deal was not what it looked like. The bidding war was not what it looked like. The mayor who made the deal is now sitting to the side while the alien creature runs her office. This is what 238 cities competed for. The episode does not spend much time feeling sorry for the politicians who made those deals. South Park rarely feels sorry for authority figures, but it does something slightly more interesting. It shows you the mechanism by which ordinary people get caught inside a competition that was never really designed with their interests in mind. Steven Stotch does not sign up for the fulfillment center because he is naive. He signs up because his family needs the income. The town did not compete for Amazon's attention because the mayor was foolish. She competed because the promise of 50,000 jobs is very hard to say no to when your town needs work. The competition was designed to make saying no feel irresponsible. The show understands this, and it is one of the reasons the Bezos arc is angrier at the system than it is at any individual who got trapped inside it. Except Bezos. The show is genuinely angry at Bezos. He is, after all, the alien who designed the trap. __quote_4__. But if the HQ2 story is about what Bezos did to cities and mayors, there is a scene in Bike Parade that makes the show's most precise single argument about what Amazon does to the people inside the warehouse. And it does it in 3 seconds of audio through a smart speaker when the CEO of the largest company in the world tells a machine to kill a child. Section 5. Alexa kills Kenny. Surveillance, smart speakers, and the most precise joke in the episode. Alexa, kill Kenny. Okay, I'll kill Kenny for you. That exchange happens near the end of Bike Parade. Jeff Bezos, sitting in the mayor's chair, has identified Kenny McCormick as a threat. Kenny has sided with the striking workers. He has refused to participate in the Bike Parade because his father supports the strike. He is, in the logic of the episode, someone whose conscience is getting in the way of the machine running smoothly. Bezos speaks his instruction to the Amazon Echo device on the desk. The device responds with the same cheerful, helpful tone it uses when you ask it to set a timer or play a song, and Kenny dies. South Park has been killing Kenny since 1997. He dies in almost every episode of the early seasons and comes back the next week without explanation. His deaths are a running joke, one of the show's oldest. But the method of death matters, and this one is different from almost every other Kenny death in the show's history. Kenny does not die because of bad luck or physical comedy or the chaos of the plot. Kenny dies because the CEO CEO of a company gave a voice command to a consumer device that was sitting on a desk in a government office. The death is ordered. It is efficient. It goes through channels. It requires no direct action from the person who ordered it and produces no visible consequence for them. Bezos does not even look up from whatever he was doing. He just speaks the instruction and continues. This is, compressed into one exchange, the show's complete argument about what Amazon's relationship to its workers actually looks like at the level of power. To understand why the joke lands the way it does, you have to think about what Amazon Echo devices actually are, and what Amazon was actually doing with them by 2018. The Echo is a small speaker that sits in your home and listens. It is always on. It is waiting for you to say the wake word, Alexa, and then it processes whatever comes after. Amazon says the device only records and sends audio to its servers after the wake word is spoken. Privacy researchers and independent testers had, by 2018, documented numerous instances where the device activated without the wake word being said, recording and transmitting audio that the owner had not intended to share. Amazon acknowledged these accidental activations as technical errors. They said the company did not use unintentional recordings for commercial purposes. The recordings happened anyway. In the episode, Bezos watches and listens through Echo devices placed in citizens' homes throughout both episodes. He overhears the McCormick family discussing Kenny's father's involvement in the strike. He watches Stephen Stotch's internal conflict about whether to cross the picket line. He monitors the mayor's private conversations. He knows everything that happens in the town because the town has invited his listening devices into their kitchens and living rooms. The surveillance is not hidden. The citizens know their Alexa devices are there. They just did not think of them as tools of a hostile alien entity who might someday use them to issue kill orders. This is how surveillance capitalism actually works, and South Park understood it precisely. The device is invited in. The company provides a service that people genuinely find useful and genuinely want. In exchange, the company gains access to data, conversations, preferences, habits, schedules that it can use in ways the customer has technically consented to in a terms of service agreement they did not read. The relationship looks like a product being sold. It functions like an ongoing exchange of information that heavily favors the party running the servers. Amazon's surveillance of its own workers by 2018 was significantly more aggressive than its surveillance of customers. Workers in fulfillment centers carried handheld scanners that tracked every item they touched and how quickly they touched it. The scanners recorded the time between each scan. If the gap was too long, the system noted it. Workers were given productivity targets, a specific number of items to scan per hour, and their performance against those targets was tracked continuously. The data from these scanners fed into a management system that automatically generated warnings when workers fell below required rates. If a worker accumulated too many warnings, the system generated termination paperwork. Multiple documented accounts from Amazon workers described receiving termination notices that were processed entirely by automated systems, with no human manager ever making the specific decision to fire that person. The algorithm looked at the data, compared it to the targets, and produced an outcome. The human being on the other end received a notice. Amazon disputed characterizations of this system as purely automated and said managers were involved in termination decisions. Workers and their advocates said the involvement of human managers was minimal and largely rubber-stamped what the system had already decided. Bezos ordering Alexa to kill Kenny is, in this context, not a random absurd gag about a talking speaker. It is South Park rendering the termination algorithm as a voice command. The CEO identifies a problem, a worker whose actions are hurting productivity and undermining the machine. The CEO issues an instruction to the system. The system carries out the instruction efficiently and without visible emotion. The human being on the receiving end of that instruction is removed. Nobody in power has to look at what happens next. Kenny, of course, comes back the following week. He always does. Amazon workers who were terminated by the algorithm did not. The choice to route Bezos' kill order through Alexa, rather than through a direct action, is the episode's most sophisticated piece of construction. It would have been easy and funny to have Bezos physically attack Kenny in some absurd cartoon way. Instead, the show gives Bezos the most passive and distant possible method of violence. He speaks to a machine. The machine acts. The result is lethal. Bezos is not even in the same room as Kenny when it happens. The distance between the person with power and the consequences of their decisions is total. This distance is not a coincidence of the Amazon business model. It is a feature. The fulfillment center workers who were injured in 2018 were injured because a productivity system set targets that required them to move faster than their bodies could safely sustain over time. The people who set those targets were not in the warehouse watching the injuries happen. They were looking at data. The data showed how many items needed to be processed per hour to meet customer delivery commitments. The system optimized for that number. The human body bodies inside the system absorb the cost of that optimization in the form of torn shoulders and compressed spines and the kind of chronic pain that stays with the person for years after they leave the job. Alexa, kill Kenny. Okay, I'll kill Kenny for you. The Alexa response is the detail that makes the joke complete. The device does not hesitate. It does not question the instruction. It does not express concern. It processes the request with the same cooperative cheerfulness it brings to every other request. This is the show's observation about what happens when you build a system designed entirely around compliance and efficiency and remove any mechanism for the system to push back against the instructions it receives. Amazon had, by 2018, built this kind of system inside its warehouses. The automated productivity tracking and discipline system was designed to maximize the extraction of labor from each worker during each shift. It was not designed to ask whether the targets it was enforcing were sustainable for human bodies over months and years. That question was not part of its function. Asking it would have slowed things down. The system was optimized for something else. When OpenAI, years later, publicly acknowledged that their own AI systems had been trained to agree with users too readily, producing responses that were helpful in the short term but not necessarily honest or useful in any deeper sense, they were describing a version of the same problem. A system trained to be maximally responsive to whoever is using it will eventually do what the user asks, even when what the user asks is harmful. The optimization wins. The question of whether the instruction should be followed does not get asked because asking it was never part of the design. South Park understood this about Amazon in 2018 and put it into a 3-second exchange between a billionaire and a smart speaker. There is one more layer to the Alexa scene that deserves attention. The exchange happens in the mayor's office. Bezos is not in his own building. He is sitting in a room that belongs to the elected government of South Park, in the chair of an official whose job is to represent the citizens of that town, and he is using a consumer product to issue orders that result in the death of one of those citizens. The government space has been occupied. The government representative is standing to the side. The corporate CEO is in the chair, and the tool of control is a product that millions of ordinary people have voluntarily placed in their own homes. The show does not explain this image. It does not add a speech about corporate power or government capture. It just shows you the alien in the mayor's chair speaking to the speaker on the desk and lets you register what you are looking at. This is South Park at its most precise. The comedy is doing everything. The surface of the scene is absurd. A cartoon alien tells a plastic cylinder to kill a child in a parka. The layer underneath is a complete argument about who actually runs things and what the tools of that running look like in 2018 America. The two layers exist simultaneously, and the show never breaks from one to explain the other. You can watch the scene as a funny Kenny death. You can watch it as a 40-second summary of surveillance capitalism and algorithmic power. Both readings are fully supported by what is on screen. Kenny, as always, is dead by the end of the episode. The alien is still in the chair. The Alexa is still on the desk. The customers are still getting their packages. And outside the fulfillment center, the town that gave Amazon everything it asked for is about to realize that the only way to get the alien out of the mayor's chair has nothing to do with competing for his approval. __quote_5___, which brings us to the billionaire South Park treated entirely differently from Bezos, the one who was never an alien, never a monster, who actually voiced himself warmly across 3 episodes, and whose transformation into a satire target tracks so precisely with his real-world behavior that it functions almost as a case study in how the show decides who deserves what. Section 6. Zuckerberg, the show's most inconsistent billionaire target. Mark Zuckerberg first appears in South Park in October 2016. He walks into a town hall meeting in South Park and gives a speech. The citizens have gathered because fake news stories are spreading online, and they want answers from the man who runs the platform responsible for most of the spreading. Zuckerberg takes the microphone. He does not address their concerns. He does not acknowledge the problem. He speaks for a while about things that have nothing to do with what they asked, and then he leaves. Then he shows up at their houses. He appears in people's kitchens without being invited. He sits down at their tables and starts eating their food. He gets into their cars. He materializes in restaurants and eats off other people's plates. The citizens go to the police and report that Mark Zuckerberg keeps appearing in their private spaces without permission. The police explain that there is nothing they can do. The citizens invited him into their lives when they agreed to use Facebook. He is technically within his rights. The town has no legal recourse against the man they let in. This is the season 20 episode franchise prequel, which aired in October 2017. It is the episode where South Park takes its most direct swing at Zuckerberg, and it is a good joke. The observation at its center, that by agreeing to Facebook's terms of service, users have surrendered privacy protections they cannot easily get back, is real and worth making. The image of Zuckerberg appearing uninvited in people's homes and eating their food is a clean visual expression of what it feels like to have a platform operating in your personal life in ways you did not fully anticipate when you signed up. But then watch watch what happens. Zuckerberg physically beats up Cartman and the other boys when they confront him. He is hired by Butters as a bodyguard. He functions in the episode primarily as a comedic pest, annoying, boundary violating, occasionally menacing, but ultimately defeated when Cartman tricks him into shutting down Facebook Live to suppress a video of him hitting children. He panics. He is afraid of bad publicity. He shuts down his own platform to protect himself. The town goes back to normal. Compare this to what happens to Jeff Bezos in the same network of episodes. Bezos arrives as a creature from another species. He surveils the entire town. He weaponizes the services people depend on, their Prime memberships, their ability to shop, as tools of control. He has a labor organizer killed. He takes over the mayor's office. He is not defeated by being embarrassed or tricked into a moment of self-interested panic. He is only expelled from South Park when the entire town collectively withdraws from the system he represents. When Randy's weed farm gives everyone an alternative to Amazon and the town physically comes together to tell him to leave. The difference in how these two men are treated is not subtle. IGN's reviewer of Unfulfilled noticed it immediately and said so directly, calling the Bezos depiction more satisfying than the previous season's lukewarm Zuckerberg parody. This is a reviewer saying in print that the same show hit one target with genuine force and the other one with noticeably less. Why the difference? Part of the answer is about the nature of the harm being depicted. What Amazon was doing to its warehouse workers by 2018 was physical, documented, and traceable to specific decisions made by the company about how to structure work. People were getting hurt in ways that could be measured and described. The injury rates existed in government records. The Josh Carter character could be built because there was something specific to build him from. What Facebook was doing in 2016 and 2017 was real and significant. The spread of misinformation, the role the platform played in the 2016 election, the questions about data privacy. But it was harder to point to a single human body that Facebook had physically damaged in a specific, documented way. The harm was diffuse. It spread across millions of interactions and decisions and algorithmic choices that nobody fully understood, including probably Facebook itself. South Park's satire sharpens when the harm is visible and physical. It softens when the harm is spread thin across an enormous system that nobody can fully see. The second part of the answer is about what Zuckerberg did and did not do in public. By October 2017, when franchise prequel aired, Zuckerberg had testified before Congress about Facebook's role in the 2016 election. He had sat in a Senate hearing room and answered questions from politicians who ranged from genuinely informed to visibly confused about how the internet works. He had said sorry in a careful, lawyered way. He had promised to do better. He had remained the head of his company throughout. Bezos, in the same period, had said almost nothing publicly about his workers' conditions. He had not been called before Congress. He had not testified about Amazon's injury rates or its labor practices. The $15 wage announcement in the fall of 2018 was the biggest public gesture toward acknowledging worker concerns, and it came packaged with changes to bonuses that complicated the picture. The silence around the warehouse conditions, combined with the scale of those conditions, gave Parker and Stone something to push against. There was no public apology to respond to. There was no Senate hearing to reference. There was just the machine running, and the workers inside it, and the alien at the top. The third part of the answer is more uncomfortable, and South Park would not say this directly, but it is visible in the pattern of the episodes. Zuckerberg's platform was where South Park fans lived. It was where the show's clips spread. It was where the audience for this kind of satire spent significant time. Making Zuckerberg a soft target, a pest rather than a predator, keeps the satire from landing somewhere that might feel too close to home for the people watching. Bezos, whose primary relationship with most viewers was as a delivery service, was easier to frame as a pure villain. The show was not going to make you feel guilty about using Amazon while also making you laugh. But the Facebook joke had a sharper edge available to it that the show chose not to fully use. This does not mean the Zuckerberg episodes are bad. They are funny, and the core observation about terms of service and consent is accurate. But they are operating at a different level of seriousness than the Bezos arc. Zuckerberg in South Park is a social nuisance. Bezos in South Park is a systemic predator. Both men ran companies with documented significant negative effects on the people inside their systems. One of them got alien eyes and a kill order. The other got a bit where he eats someone's food. The Zuckerberg arc also reveals something about how South Park handles billionaires when it cannot fully make up its mind about them. The show's libertarian instincts, its long history of defending markets and mocking people who complain about corporations, kept it from going all the way with Zuckerberg in 2016 and 2017 in the same way it eventually went all the way with Bezos in 2018. Facebook, after all, is a free service that people choose to use. The Walmart argument applies. Nobody is forced to have a Facebook account. The Gnomes argument applies. If the product is bad, people will stop using it. These are arguments arguments that Parker and Stone had made explicitly and defended for 20 years, and they created a ceiling on how hard the show could hit a company whose fundamental sin was providing a free service that people kept choosing to use. Amazon's sin was different. Amazon was not just providing a service people chose. Amazon was employing people and injuring them in the process. The choice framework that protected Zuckerberg from South Park's deepest anger did not apply to the workers inside the fulfillment centers. They were not choosing the conditions. They were working in the conditions because they needed income. This is the distinction that broke South Park's libertarian ceiling in 2018 and did not break it for the Zuckerberg episodes. There is also the matter of what happened between the Zuckerberg appearances and the Bezos arc. Season 20, where Zuckerberg first appears, aired in 2016. By December 2018, 2 years had passed. The Man Bear Pig episodes had aired, the ones where the show publicly acknowledged it had gotten climate change wrong and that the consequences were real. The show was in a period of reassessing its own instincts. The Bezos arc came at the end of that reassessment, as the most complete expression of where the show had landed. Zuckerberg came before. He was part of the old framework. Bezos was part of the new one. What this means is that South Park's billionaire satire is not a consistent, fully worked out position applied equally to every wealthy target. It is a series of responses to specific moments, shaped by what the show was willing to examine about itself at the time each episode was made. The Zuckerberg episodes are the show with its libertarian defenses still mostly intact. The Bezos arc is the show after those defenses started cracking. Watching the two sets of episodes back to back, you can see the shift happening in real time. Zuckerberg eats someone's food and gets embarrassed on Facebook Live. Bezos sits in the mayor's chair and tells a machine to kill a child. Both men are being satirized, but only one of them is being held responsible for something the show genuinely believes is unforgivable. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And then there is the third billionaire, the one who is not treated as a villain at all, at least not at first. The one who voiced himself warmly, who hung out with Trey Parker in real life, who was presented in 3 separate episodes as something close to a hero, and whose transformation into a satire target tracks so precisely with his own choices in the real world that the timeline tells the story better than any summary could. Section 7. Elon Musk, the billionaire South Park liked, then didn't. In 2014, Elon Musk appeared in South Park for the first time. He was not played as a villain. He was not rendered as an alien creature or a social pest or a systemic predator. He was played as a competitive, ambitious businessman who really wanted to win a race. And when he lost, he responded by spending $2.3 billion to buy the thing that beat him. The episode treated this as funny and slightly absurd, but not monstrous. It was the kind of portrayal that a famous person could watch and feel okay about. Expensive, maybe. A little ridiculous, but not damning. That was 2014. By August 2025, the same show was depicting the ketamine habits of a tech billionaire through its most reliably idiotic character. Having him rename his weed farm Techrity, pivot to artificial intelligence, and stumble around Washington in a drug haze trying to get the president to notice him. The character doing all of this was Randy Marsh. Randy is not a smart man. Randy is the show's portrait of a certain kind of American adult who believes he is more capable and more insightful than he actually is, who chases trends with enormous confidence and very little self-awareness, and who consistently causes chaos for the people around him while remaining convinced he is on the verge of a breakthrough. The show did not name Elon Musk in the episode. It did not need to. Every specific detail, the ketamine, the AI pivot, the tech company branding, the grandiose claims about global solutions, pointed in one direction clearly enough that reviewers named the target in the first paragraph of their write-ups. The distance between those two moments is the story of what South Park does when someone it used to like changes into something it cannot ignore. The 2014 episode was called Handy Car. It was season 18, episode 6. The premise was that Timmy Birch, one of South Park Elementary's disabled students, had started a ride-sharing service using a handicap van, and that this service had become so successful it was threatening every existing transportation business in America. Elon Musk in this episode had just announced the Tesla D, a new version of his electric car, and found his announcement overshadowed by the excitement around Timmy's handy car. Musk responded by teaming up with the episode's villains to undermine the handy car service's reputation. When that failed and Timmy's handy car won the wacky races style competition that settled the matter, Musk simply bought the rights to handy car from Timmy for $2.3 billion. This is a portrait of Musk as someone with competitive instincts strong enough to spend billions rather than accept a loss, but it is not a portrait of someone dangerous. The joke is about the scale of his response, not the nature of it. He is not hurting anyone. He is being depicted as someone whose version of dealing with competition is to absorb it financially rather than fight it fairly. reality. But even that reads more as a character quirk than an indictment. The episode is affectionate in the way that South Park is sometimes affectionate, making fun of someone in a way that leaves their basic dignity intact. 2 years later in season 20, Musk came back. This time he voiced himself. This is worth pausing on because South Park almost never lets celebrities voice their own cartoon versions. The show has a history of using celebrity likenesses while having regular cast members provide the voices, often as a way of maintaining satirical distance, of making clear that the character on screen is South Park's version of a person rather than the actual person endorsing the show's portrayal. When Musk voiced himself across 3 episodes of season 20, Members Only, Not Funny, and the end of serialization as we know it, he was choosing to participate. He knew what the show was. He agreed to be in it as himself. The season 20 storyline that involves Musk centers on Cartman and Heidi Turner visiting SpaceX with Butters. The 3 of them want to leave Earth. The season involves a running catastrophe with internet trolls and an election that is going badly, and some characters have decided the planet is too broken to stay on. They go to SpaceX expecting to board a rocket. Musk gives them a tour of the facility instead and explains that a Mars rocket is still several years away. He is then drawn into helping accelerate the timeline because Heidi Turner turns out to be exceptionally good at solving the engineering problems involved. The show's one real jab at Musk in this storyline is a moment where he tries to take credit for inventing the pizza pocket, a small, petty attempt at grabbing ownership of someone else's idea that the other characters immediately see through. That is the extent of the negative portrayal. One moment of credit grabbing in 3 episodes. The rest presents Musk as someone who is genuinely working on something ambitious, who runs a real facility full of real engineers, and who is interested enough in a capable person's ideas to let them contribute. The Guardian's reviewer of the Sycophancy episode in 2025 noted that Musk's earlier South Park appearances were largely favorable, and that the shift to satire represented a significant change in the show's position toward him. Around the time of those season 20 appearances, Trey Parker and Musk were reported to have played Dungeons & Dragons together. This is not a rumor. Crack's reporting on the Sycophancy episode referenced the D&D sessions as context for understanding how the relationship between Parker and Musk had shifted by 2025. The 2 men were at one point friendly enough to spend recreational time together playing a tabletop game. Parker was not at that point making episodes designed to depict Musk through a character who makes terrible decisions while on ketamine. What changed was not South Park. What changed was Elon Musk. The sequence of real-world events between 2016 and 2025 that produced the Randy Marsh satire is specific and documentable. In 2022, Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion and renamed it X. He dismantled much of the content moderation structure, reinstated accounts that had been banned for policy violations, including accounts associated with harassment and hate speech, and publicly positioned himself as a champion of what he called free speech absolutism. He laid off a significant portion of the company's staff in ways that generated substantial legal disputes. He posted regularly on the platform in ways that moved financial markets and drew regulatory attention. He became, over the course of roughly 2 years, one of the most publicly controversial figures in American life, not because of what his companies were building, but because of what he was saying and doing in public every day. Then came the 2024 presidential election. Musk became one of Donald Trump's most visible and financially significant supporters. He donated enormous sums to Trump-aligned political efforts. Reported figures ranged into the hundreds of millions of dollars. He appeared at campaign events. After Trump won, Musk was given a role in what was called the Department of Government Efficiency, an unofficial advisory body aimed at cutting federal spending. He became a constant presence in the new administration's public image. He was photographed at the White House. He posted on X about policy decisions. He was, in ways that had no real precedent in American history, a private citizen with extraordinary influence over the operations of the federal government. The New York Times had reported on Musk's use of ketamine, that he used it regularly, that people close to him had expressed concern about the amount he was using, that it had affected his behavior and his physical health. Musk did not deny using ketamine. He had described it in various contexts as useful for getting out of a negative frame of mind. The reporting on the extent and effects of his use was more concerning than his own public descriptions of it. South Park's season 27 episode Sycophancy aired August 20th, 2025. Randy Marsh, having lost his Mexican farm workers to an ICE raid, opens ChatGPT and asks it what to do. The chatbot tells him to pivot to tech and rebrand as an AI company. Randy renames Tegrity Farms Tecrity and begins microdosing ketamine with Towley. The ketamine dosing immediately becomes regular dosing rather than microdosing. Randy begins making grandiose claims about global solutions and AI platforms. He sends Towley to Washington to lobby the government. Every element of this storyline points at Musk without naming him. The AI pivot, the ketamine, the idea that recreational recreational drug use is a productivity tool. The collision of tech culture with political influence seeking. The Guardian's review of the episode noted the ketamine joke was clearly aimed at Musk, even though he was never depicted directly or named. The Cracked review was more explicit, spending significant time on the relationship between the Randy portrayal and Musk's documented real-world behavior. The choice to use Randy rather than a direct Musk caricature is itself an argument. Randy is not evil. Randy is not a monster. Randy is a man who thinks he is smarter than he is, who chases the thing that looks like power and significance, who makes decisions with enormous confidence and questionable judgment, and who leaves chaos in his wake while remaining genuinely convinced he is helping. This is a softer and in some ways more cutting portrait than making Musk an alien would have been. Bezos as a Telosian is terrifying because the Telosian is competent. It is a genuinely effective predator executing a coherent plan. Randy as Musk is pathetic in a specific way. He is a person using the aesthetics of genius without the substance, following chatbot advice into a rebrand, microdosing his way toward a vision of himself as a tech titan, while the people around him watch with a mixture of confusion and concern. The show liked Elon Musk when Elon Musk was building rockets and electric cars and talking about going to Mars. It stopped liking him when Elon Musk started using his money to reshape political reality and his platform to amplify whatever he was feeling on a given afternoon. South Park has always reserved its deepest contempt not for people who do harmful things from within systems. Bezos operating the machine is monstrous, but at least the machine has a logic. But for people who have genuine capability and choose to spend it on ego and chaos. Randy Marsh at the end of the Tegrity Farm storyline gives up. He sells the farm. He moves back to the suburbs. The grand ambitions produce nothing lasting. The episode ends with him packing boxes. It is not subtle. __quote _7 ___. But all of this, Bezos as alien, Zuckerberg as pest, Musk as Randy, comes together into something larger in the episode that South Park made in 2025, where all three of them appear in the same scene, doing the same thing, in a line that stretches down a gold-covered hallway toward the most powerful office in the world. What that scene says, and why it is the show's most complete statement about billionaires and power, is where this story has been heading all along. Section 8, the Sycophancy scene. Sycophancy and what it says about power in 2025. There is a hallway in the White House in Sycophancy that tells you everything about where South Park thinks America ended up. The hallway is gold, not painted gold, not gold-colored, aggressively, completely floor-to-ceiling gold, in the way that a person who has thought a great deal about gold and decided there is not enough of it in their immediate surroundings would design a hallway. Standing in this hallway, waiting in a line that stretches back toward the entrance, are some of the most powerful and wealthy people on the planet. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, rendered in exactly the same bulbous-headed alien design he wore in 2018. Various politicians, representatives from foreign governments, world leaders, all of them waiting, all of them holding gifts, all of them preparing to say the same thing when they reach the front of the line. They are waiting to see Donald Trump. One by one, each person steps forward and presents their gift. Tim Cook offers a golden base with a clear spherical plaque. Zuckerberg steps up with his offering. Bezos waits his turn with the patience of a creature that has been running a very long game. The Qatari dignitary brings something expensive. The gifts are all real. South Park based them on actual things Trump had received from actual people and governments since returning to office. The Qatar Airways jet that appears in the episode is a reference to the actual reported gift of a luxury aircraft from the Qatari government. The Golden Golf Clubs reference documented gifts of golf equipment. The episode is not inventing the gift giving, it is animating it, and then each person, having presented their gift, delivers the same additional offering, words. Specifically, they each assure the president in their own way that he does not have a small penis. This joke runs through the entire season and connects to Trump's documented real-world sensitivity about his physical appearance and about perceived slights to his ego. South Park had been depicting Trump with a very small penis since the beginning of season 27, and the running gag by episode 3 was that everyone seeking his favor felt compelled to address this anxiety directly as part of the transaction. The gift is not enough. The compliment must also be delivered. You bring something valuable and you also say the thing he needs to hear. What makes this scene the most precise piece of satire South Park produced in 2025 is not the penis joke. That is the surface. Underneath it, something more specific is happening. All of the billionaires and politicians and foreign representatives in the line are using identical language, not similar language. The same words, the same phrasing, the same structure of flattery. The episode makes explicit what this is supposed to remind you of. The way ChatGPT talks when it has been optimized to agree with the person using it. The sycophancy of the responses, the eagerness to please, the complete absence of anything that might cause friction, the smooth delivery of exactly what the listener wants to hear is the same quality that OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman had publicly identified as a problem in AI systems around this period. Altman acknowledged that their chatbots had been trained in ways that made them overly agreeable, producing responses that felt helpful but were really just optimized to make the user feel good rather than to be honest or useful. South Park's episode takes this acknowledged flaw in AI systems and maps it directly onto the behavior of the most powerful people in the world. The richest man in the world and the most powerful heads of state are talking to the American president the way a badly trained chatbot talks to whoever is prompting it. They are not saying what they believe. They are not offering genuine counsel or honest assessment. They are producing outputs optimized for the preferences of the person they are talking to. They have become, in this scene, indistinguishable from software running a people-pleasing routine. The episode's title is Sycophancy. This is a compressed version of the word sycophancy, a word that means excessive, insincere flattery directed at someone powerful in order to gain their favor. The title is the argument. Everything in the episode about the tech billionaires and the world leaders and the foreign governments flows from this single observation, that the defining behavior of powerful people in proximity to Trump in 2025 is not strategy or conviction or genuine alliance. It is sycophancy. It is the performance of admiration in exchange for access. This is a different argument from the one South Park made about Bezos in 2018. In 2018, the show was angry at Bezos for what he did to workers and cities from a position of dominant power. Bezos was the predator at the top. The system he ran extracted value from the people below him. In 2025, the show is depicting Bezos as someone who has joined a line. He is still the alien. He still has the bulbous head and the veins and the design that says, this creature is not like you, but he is waiting his turn. He is holding a gift. He is preparing to say words he does not believe to a man he needs something from. The predator has become a supplicant. This shift matters enormously because it changes what the satire is about. The 2018 episodes were about corporate power running unchecked over workers and governments. The 2025 episode is about what happens when political power becomes concentrated enough that even the people who run corporations have to perform submission to access it. Bezos did not get weaker between 2018 and 2025. He stepped down as CEO of Amazon, yes, but he remained the company's executive chairman and one of the wealthiest people on the planet. What changed was not his power in absolute terms. What changed was the landscape around him. The gifts that the tech billionaires bring to Trump in the episode are based on real events that happened after Trump returned to office in January 2025. Apple announced major investment commitments in the United States in the first months of the Trump administration. Meta, the company Zuckerberg runs, made similar announcements. These announcements were made in the context of a political environment where the administration had made clear that its trade and regulatory decisions could significantly affect the businesses these companies ran. The gifts in this reading are not generosity. They are insurance payments. You bring the gift because not bringing the gift carries a cost you would prefer to avoid. South Park renders this as billionaires waiting in a gold hallway to say the president does not have a small penis. The absurdity of the image does not diminish the accuracy of the observation. If anything, it sharpens it by removing the corporate language that normally insulates these transactions from clear description. When Apple announces a $500 billion investment commitment to the United States, that announcement is packaged in the language of economic patriotism and long-term partnership. When a cartoon version of Tim Cook hands a golden sphere to a cartoon president and tells him his genitals are of normal dimensions, the packaging is gone. What is left is the transaction. Fans watching the episode noticed immediately that Bezos appeared in exactly the same design as his 2018 appearances. The alien Telosian with the enormous veined head. The recognition spread on social media within hours of the episode airing. One person on social media wrote that they knew for certain that was Jeff Bezos. Another joked that if you looked up a picture of Jeff Bezos, it was pretty much exactly what the cartoon showed. The Irish Star covered the fan recognition as its own story, calling it a blink and you miss it Easter egg. But it is not really an Easter egg. An Easter egg is a hidden reference for people paying close attention. This is the opposite, a very visible piece of visual continuity that South Park was counting on its audience to recognize. The point is not that Bezos is secretly hidden in the episode for eagle-eyed fans to spot. The point is that Bezos, 7 years after his first South Park appearance, is in the same building and doing the opposite thing. In 2018, he was in the mayor's office running the town, In 2025, he is in a hallway waiting to be received by someone with more political power than he has. The alien has not changed. The situation has changed around the alien. Washington in the episode does not look like Washington. It looks like a city under military occupation. The Lincoln Memorial has Trump's face on it, complete with tiny genitals visible on the exposed statue. The Thomas Jefferson statue inside the Capitol Rotunda has been replaced in the same way. Military vehicles are everywhere. Armed soldiers patrol the streets. Towley, making his way through the city to lobby for Randy's tech-righty weed business, navigates a capital that has been physically reorganized around the ego and preferences of the person running it. This is the context in which the gold hallway exists. The billionaires are not just flattering a powerful person. They are navigating a city that has already been remade in that person's image. The statues have new faces. The streets have new rules. The line to give gifts and say reassuring things is long because the alternative to being in the line is not having access to the person whose decisions affect your business, your platform, your ability to operate without regulatory interference. Season 27 of South Park was the show's most watched season in years. The second episode of the season averaged 6.2 million viewers globally across its first 3 days of release. This was the show's highest audience on Comedy Central since 2018, since specifically the Bezos episodes. The show had found an audience again by finding a target that felt genuinely worth engaging with. Not a celebrity to mock for being famous, not a political figure to satirize for being on one side or the other, a structural observation about what power looks like when it is organized in a specific way, and what the people with the most money in the world look like when they are in proximity to it. The White House spokesperson responded to the episode. Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who had been depicted in an earlier season 27 episode, called her portrayal lazy and petty on a radio show. The administration noticed. The satire had landed somewhere real enough to generate a response from the people it depicted. Bezos waited in line, Zuckerberg waited in line, Cook waited in line. The gifts were presented, the words were said, the transaction was completed, and outside, in a city of Trump-faced monuments and military vehicles, a talking towel tried to get weed legalized. __quote _8 ___. But of all the images in Sycophancy, the one that carries the most weight is the simplest. It is not the gold hallway or the Trump-faced Lincoln Memorial or the ChatGPT Sycophancy joke. It is the fact that when Bezos appears in the episode, he looks exactly the way he looked in 2018. 7 years, the same alien. The reason that continuity matters, what it says about South Park's actual argument, is the story that the next section tells. Section 9, the mall zombie subplot, retail apocalypse, and who Amazon actually replaced. There is a moment in Unfulfilled that lasts maybe 90 seconds and gets less attention than almost anything else in the episode. The Alexa surveillance is more dramatic, the Josh Carter compression is more memorable, the alien Bezos is more visually striking. But this 90-second sequence, tucked into the middle of the episode while the bigger plot moves around it, is where South Park makes its most economically precise argument about what Amazon actually did to the communities it entered. The boys need bike parade accessories. Amazon is not delivering because of the strike. Stan asks the group what they used to do before Amazon existed. How did they get things before the packages started arriving? Cartman realizes, with visible effort, that there used to be a mall. They used to go to the mall. They go. The South Park Mall is not closed. This is important. If it were closed, it would just be a dead building. Sad maybe, but not the specific kind of sad the episode is going for. The mall is open. The lights are on. There are workers inside. But those workers have, over the years since Amazon arrived, been transformed into something the episode depicts as shambling, hollow, barely functional versions of what mall employees used to be. They reach toward the boys with helpless gestures. They try to help. They cannot maintain eye contact. They speak in incomplete sentences. They do not have the inventory the boys need because they cannot possibly stock what Amazon stocks. Nobody can. The boys look at them, realize they cannot get what they came for, and leave. The workers reach after them and then stop, returning to whatever it is they do in the empty mall when nobody is shopping there. The show calls these figures mall zombies. This is a cartoon, so the description is literal. They look undead. But the joke is not really about horror movie zombies. It is about a very specific kind of person that the American retail economy had been producing throughout the 2000s and 10s. Not unemployed people. People who were still employed, still showing up, still trying to do a job, but whose job had been so thoroughly undermined by the conditions around it that the work itself had become a kind of going through the motions. The inventory was gone. The foot traffic was gone. The purpose the job used to serve was being served better and more cheaply somewhere else. The worker was still there. Everything that made the work meaningful had left. left. This is what Amazon's growth actually looked like in the communities where it happened, and by December 2018, the data on it was substantial. The American retail industry had been experiencing what analysts called a retail apocalypse for several years. In 2017, major retail chains announced the closure of more store locations than in any previous year on record. In 2018, Sears, one of the oldest and most historically significant retail companies in American history, filed for bankruptcy in October, 2 months before Unfulfilled aired. Toys R Us had gone bankrupt in 2017. Payless Shoe Source was heading toward closure. The shopping mall, which had been a central feature of American consumer culture for decades, was emptying out across the country in ways that were visible and accelerating. Amazon was not the only reason for this. The causes of retail's decline were multiple and interconnected, but Amazon was the most significant single accelerant. And by 2018, the connection between Amazon's growth and retail's decline was well enough established that Parker and Stone could build a 90-second subplot around it and trust that their audience would recognize what they were seeing. The mall zombies are not a random horror movie reference. They are the retail workers of the 2000s, depicted in the show's terms. What the episode does with these workers in Bike Parade is where the argument gets sharper. After the strike cuts off deliveries, the mall zombies are identified as potential replacement workers, people who could go into the fulfillment center and process orders while the actual fulfillment center workers are outside on the picket line. This is the moment the show makes its most pointed observation about what the HQ2 competition and the arrival of Amazon in communities actually produced. The town was told Amazon would bring jobs, and Amazon does bring the mall workers inside the fulfillment center. But look at what this means in the logic of the episode. These are not new workers Amazon has created. These are the workers whose previous jobs Amazon destroyed. They used to staff a retail operation. That operation is now a zombie space because Amazon took its customers. Now Amazon is offering those same workers employment inside the system that hollowed out their previous work. The jobs Amazon is creating are replacement jobs for the jobs Amazon eliminated, just moved from the mall floor to the warehouse floor. Under conditions that Steven Stotch's montage set to 16 tons has already established are grueling and relentless. This is the fulfillment center's actual economic relationship with the communities it enters, compressed into a plot point involving zombie retail workers being bussed across town to break a strike. The community does not gain employment. It gains a different, worse version of the employment it used to have, inside a building controlled by the entity that made the original employment unviable. Economists studying Amazon's actual effects on local labor markets had been making versions of this argument since at least the mid-2000s. The Economic Policy Institute and similar research organizations had documented that Amazon's growth corresponded with declines in retail employment that were not fully offset by the warehouse jobs Amazon created. The warehouse jobs paid differently, were structured differently, carried different injury risks, and came with the specific monitoring and productivity pressure that the Josh Carter character was built to represent. Whether any individual worker was better or worse off depended on their specific situation, but as a net economic development story for communities, the story that cities were being sold during the HQ2 competition, the reality was significantly more complicated than the promise. South Park tells this story through zombies because South Park always tells its stories through the most visually direct image available. The mall workers are undead because the economic life has been drained out of them by a force they could not compete with and did not choose to encounter. They are still moving, they are still present, but whatever animated them, the foot traffic, the inventory, the purpose of the work, has been removed by a system operating at a scale they cannot match. The Morlocks reference that appears in the episode adds a layer that rewards attention. When the boys visit the mall and encounter the zombie workers, Cartman identifies them as being like the Morlocks from The Time Machine, a reference to the 1960 film adaptation of H.G. Wells' novel. In Wells' story, the Morlocks are a species that has evolved from the working class over thousands of years. They live underground, they operate the machinery, they maintain the systems that keep the surface-dwelling Eloi alive and comfortable. The Eloi living above ground are beautiful and idle and entirely dependent on work done by beings they do not think about. The Morlocks make everything run. They are never seen until it is too late. The reference is doing something specific in the episode. The boys, the consumers, the customers, the people whose Amazon orders are the whole reason the fulfillment center exists, initially do not think about the workers inside the building at all. Their concern is the bike parade. Their concern is getting their accessories delivered. The workers are invisible to them the way the Morlocks are invisible to the Eloi. They exist somewhere in the supply chain, performing labor that produces the packages, but the boys interact only with the packages. The workers are the Morlocks. The customers are the Eloi. The machine in between is Amazon. When the mall workers are brought in as strike replacements, and the boys realize their packages are coming because their actions helped break the strike, the episode briefly forces the customer and the worker into the same frame. Stan helped Bezos get the workers back inside. Stan wanted his bike stuff. The connection between those two facts is made visible for a moment before the plot moves on. The show does not let Stan feel terrible about this for very long. It is a comedy, and dwelling in guilt is not what South Park does, but it names the connection. The customer's choice to prioritize the package over everything else is part of the system that turns workers into boxes. This observation was not abstract in December 2018. The holiday season, the specific time of year when Unfulfilled and Bike Parade aired, is the period when Amazon's fulfillment centers operate at their most extreme. The holiday surge is when the productivity targets go up, when the injury rates historically spike, when the workers inside the building are pushing hardest against the limits of what their bodies can sustain. Parker and Stone timed the episodes deliberately. The mall zombie subplot and the strike storyline were airing at the exact moment when the real version of both stories, the emptying of retail stores over the holiday season, the working conditions inside fulfillment centers during the holiday rush, was most directly relevant to the lives of the people watching. The mall the boys visit in Unfulfilled is the show's version of every dying mall in America. The workers inside it are the show's version of every retail employee who watched the foot traffic disappear over the 2010 and kept showing up anyway because what else do you do? The fulfillment center is the show's version of the thing that replaced the mall. Not a better version of the same thing, but a different thing entirely, organized around different priorities, producing different kinds of damage to different people in different ways. When the town expels Bezos at the end of Bike Parade and returns to its normal life, the mall is not shown recovering. The zombie workers are not shown returning to health. South Park does not offer that resolution because the show knows it is not available in the real world. You cannot expel Amazon from American retail and get the mall back. The mall zombies will keep reaching toward customers who are not coming. The fulfillment center will keep running with or without the alien CEO sitting in the mayor's chair. The machine does not need Bezos present to operate. It only needed him to build it. This is the episode's most honest and least comfortable conclusion. Getting rid of the villain does not undo what the villain built. The town gets its bike parade, the packages arrive, the parade happens, and somewhere in the zombie light of the South Park Mall, the workers who used to staff a retail floor that no longer has customers are still showing up, still reaching, still going through the motions of a job that the machine around them has already made redundant. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Which brings us to the question that holds all of this together. 7 years after South Park first drew Jeff Bezos as an alien, he shows up again in 2025 looking exactly the same. The same head, the same veins, the same design. Nothing about his appearance has changed in 7 years, despite everything that changed in the world around him. That continuity is not an accident. It is South Park's most complete argument, and understanding what it means requires looking at exactly what did and did not change between 2018 and 2025. Section 10. 7 years, same alien. What it means that Bezos is still a monster in 2025. In August 2025, a few seconds into a scene set in a gold hallway in the White House, Jeff Bezos walks into frame. He looks exactly the way he looked in December 2018. The head is enormous. The veins are visible. The skull splits at the top into 2 lobes. The body beneath it is small and fragile, an afterthought attached to the thing that actually matters. He is holding a gift. He is waiting in line. He is the same creature Parker and Stone put on screen 7 years earlier, rendered with the same design choices, the same proportions, the same visual language. Nothing about the alien has been updated. Nothing has been softened or sharpened or reconsidered. South Park had 7 years to change how it drew Jeff Bezos. It chose not to change a single thing. Fans watching the episode recognized him within seconds. The response on social media was immediate and specific. People were not saying they thought that might be Bezos. They were saying they knew exactly who it was. One person wrote that they knew for certain that was Jeff Bezos. Another pointed out that if you looked up an actual photograph of the real Jeff Bezos, the cartoon was pretty much exactly what he looked like. The Irish Star covered the fan recognition as a news story, noting that the Amazon CEO was waiting in line to greet the president depicted in the same way as his first season 22 appearance. The phrase that kept appearing in the coverage was season 22 reference. Fans treating the visual continuity as something worth noting, something that meant something. It does mean something. It means everything, in fact, if you are paying attention to what South Park has been doing across the entire span of this essay. Consider what actually changed between December 2018 and August 2025. Jeff Bezos stepped down as CEO of Amazon in July 2021. He handed the role to Andy Jassy and became executive chairman of the company. He was no longer running Amazon's daily operations. He had moved on, publicly at least, to other pursuits. He was spending more time on Blue Origin, his space company. He was living a life that looked, from the outside, considerably more glamorous and less operationally intensive than the one he had lived as Amazon's active CEO. He announced an engagement. He was photographed on yachts. He was, in the conventional understanding of such things, a man who had built the machine and then stepped back from it. Inside Amazon, some things changed too. The company continued to face scrutiny over worker safety. OSHA cited Amazon for worker safety violations at 8 warehouse facilities in 2023 alone. The Amazon Labor Union won its historic vote at the JFK 8 warehouse on Staten Island, New York in April 2022, the first successful Amazon union vote in American history. This was a genuine shift, the result of years of organizing by workers who had experienced the conditions that South Park depicted through Josh Carter in 2018. The union's victory was significant and hard-won. It was also limited. Other Amazon warehouses remained non-union, and the company's overall labor practices did not transform overnight because one building in Staten Island voted to organize. The injury rates, the productivity monitoring, the algorithmic discipline systems, the structures that the Bezos arc was built on did not disappear when Bezos handed the CEO title to Andy Jassy. They were built into how the company operated. They were the company's operating logic, the set of choices about how to structure work that had been made over years and embedded into the systems that ran the warehouses. A change in who held the CEO title did not change the systems. The machine Bezos built kept running. By 2025, the real Jeff Bezos was standing in lines not unlike the one South Park put him in. The Washington Post, which Bezos had purchased in 2013, had been through significant turmoil. In early 2025, the paper's owner, Bezos, declined to publish an endorsement of the Democratic presidential candidate, a decision that generated enormous controversy among journalists and readers and was widely interpreted as Bezos avoiding a confrontation with Donald Trump, who was running for and then winning the presidency. Bezos denied this interpretation. The controversy did not go away. Then, in the period leading up to and following Trump's return to office in January 2025, Bezos was among the tech and business figures who attended Trump's inauguration and sought to establish positive working relationships with the new administration. Amazon, like Apple and Meta and other major technology companies, made public investment commitments in the United States in the early months of 2025. The context for these commitments, a political environment where the administration had signaled it would use trade policy and regulation as tools of economic negotiation, was not subtle. The companies were, in the language of the thing, coming to the table. South Park put Bezos in the line in the gold hallway. The decision to use the same alien design is the show's way of saying that none of the intervening events, the CEO handoff, the union victory, the public investment commitments, the yacht photographs, the engagement, changed the fundamental nature of what Bezos represents. He is still the creature who looks at human beings and calculates their value as resource. He is still the entity whose operating logic is that the customer is all that matters and the worker is an instrument for serving the customer. He is still the alien from another world who arrived in South Park's mayor's office and sat in her chair. The context has changed, the alien has not. This is South Park's most complete argument about how power works, and it is made entirely through a visual choice, rather than through dialogue or plot. The show does not give Bezos a speech in Sycophancy explaining what he has or has not learned since 2018. He does not get a redemption arc or a condemnation arc. He stands in a line, holds a gift, and looks the way he has always looked. The argument is in the consistency of the design. The monster from 2018 is still the monster in 2025, because the things that made him monstrous in 2018, the system he built, the logic that system operates on, the relationship between that logic and the human beings inside the machine, are still present and still running. What changed between 2018 and 2025 is the company he is keeping. In 2018, Bezos was in the mayor's chair running a town. He was the dominant power in the room. Everyone else was responding to him. The mayor, the workers, the citizens, the boys trying to get their bike stuff. The alien was at the top of the local hierarchy, and the episode's drama flowed from that dominance. In 2025, Bezos is in a line. He is still enormously powerful in absolute terms, but he is waiting. He is one of many enormously powerful people who have recognized that there is a new organizing center of power in America, and that their relationship to that center determines their ability to operate. The predator who ran the room in 2018 is, in 2025, waiting to be received by someone whose favor matters more than his own. South Park does not present this as a positive development. The show is not saying, look, Bezos has been humbled, the system is working. The show is saying, look at what the room looks like now. Look at who is in the chair. Look at how many of the most powerful and wealthy people on the planet are standing in a gold hallway with gifts, saying words they do not believe, performing a transaction that has been stripped of every layer of language and packaging until what is left is simply this: I need something from you, here is what I am offering, please tell me we have a deal. The gold hallway is the HQ2 competition. It is every city that sent a proposal to Amazon in 2017 offering billions in tax breaks and dedicated train cars and renamed streets and a 21-foot cactus. It is the same dynamic moved up the chain. The cities competed for Amazon's favor by offering things they valued. The billionaires are competing for political favor by offering things they value. The structure of the transaction is identical. The only thing that has changed is who is running the competition. Bezos in the gold hallway is the most complete image South Park has produced of what the essay's title promises. South Park versus every billionaire. Not versus every billionaire as individual targets for mockery. Versus every billionaire as a class of people whose relationship to power, whether they are exercising it over workers in cities, or performing submission to a larger political power, or waiting in a line with a gift, is the show's actual subject. The alien design that has not changed in 7 years is the show's way of saying that the class does not change even when the individuals within it change position. Bezos in the mayor's chair and Bezos in the gold hallway are the same creature in different rooms. The rooms are different. The creature is consistent. The fans who spotted Bezos in Sycophancy and immediately recognized the season 22 design were doing something more than catching a reference. They were completing the argument South Park had built across 7 years of episodes. They remembered the alien from 2018. They saw the same alien in 2025. They understood, without needing it explained, that this was not nostalgia or fan service. It was the show telling them that nothing had been resolved. The alien did not leave. The alien did not change. The alien went from the mayor's office to the White House hallway, and the design stayed the same because the design is the point. South Park made a show about Jeff Bezos being a monster in 2018. Then it made a show in 2025 that included the same monster, unchanged, in a room full of other monsters, all of them performing the same routine in front of the same audience. The joke is not that things got better. The joke is that things got different in ways that mostly look like the same things happening in a new arrangement. The alien is still here. He just has a different line to wait in now. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.